There's no disrespect.
The mouse. My son took me to one when the Angels came in. Well, go.
Okay, let's call this meeting to order. First item on the agenda, staff roll call.
Attendance is noted.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda, approval of the minutes for the regular meeting of May 29th, 2012.
So moved.
Second. Okay. First and second, any discussion? Seeing none, call the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries. Thank you. This is an opportunity for the citizens to address anything not on the agenda. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the next item. And that would be under new business. Item number 1, PC letter number 11, consideration of 2014 to 2017 capital improvement program and a finding of consistency with the comp plan of the capital improvement program and the 2013 capital improvement budget. Staff?
Thank you, Chair Jabs. And Chris Regis is the city's finance manager, and he's going to present the capital improvement budget and capital improvement plan.
Thank you, John. What I've got here is a short slide program, basically just kind of going over some of the material that you've already received and things like that. So I'll just begin here. The capital process. Projects are identified by city commissions, departments, HRA. A preliminary report is generated by the city manager and presented to the planning commission, which you have tonight. The planning commission reviews the projects based on the following consideration. Basically, that the proposed projects within the plan and the budget are in conformance to the comprehensive plan. The budget and the plan as recommended by the planning commission is returned to the city manager. Then the city manager then formalizes the budget and plan and includes it in the city's annual budget. For the 2013 capital improvement budget, total project costs are approximately $7.4 million. And the budget and the plan are broken up into really three categories: recreation projects, right-of-way projects, and public facilities. The recreation projects are all entirely funded by liquor profits. Each year there's an annual transitory ordinance done and that the council votes on and approves and things, and then the projects go forward after that. So for 2013 is the final year of the outdoor pool renovation loan repayment. There's still 3 years left then on the Lincoln Field loan repayment, but that will be completed in 2015. And then there's the annual park maintenance allotment, which will vary anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000 each year. There's improvements that are money set aside funding for improvements at Taft Lake for like a fishing dock and things like that. There's ice arena improvements. I think it's bleachers and some skate tile need to be put on there, new bleachers and new skate tile, and there's pool improvements also planned for that year. And I think also one thing I forgot to mention on their list on there is there's money set aside for relocating Richfield's community gardens off of the MAC property to a park somewhere within Richfield. And then we have right-of-way projects, approximately $4.9 million. We have North Richfield Parkway and the Taft Lake Improvement Project. It's really two projects. I've shown them as one line item because they're almost connected. It's approximately $4.2 million in 2013. Then there's a railroad signal at 70th Street, and then there's the annual street maintenance, either seal coating of bituminous streets or a mill and overlay of the streets. And usually In this plan, all the odd years have the seal coating, and the even years have the mill and overlay of the streets. And in the public facilities, we got the annual equipment replacement, which is funded by an annual tax levy, which we started here in 2012. That since levy limits have been removed, we don't have to issue debt to do that anymore. And that's for rolling stock replacement and IT equipment replacement and upgrades. Then we also, something new, we have the Fire Station 2 remodel. That's needed for basically gender equity issues. The fire staff now has, I think, 3, maybe 4 female firefighters, which they weren't firefighters back when they built that station initially, so that's causing some problems, so they need to correct that. And also there's some energy upgrades and storage upgrades that they want to improve upon in the station. There's utility improvements. I think the primary improvement there is a soda ash, something to do with the water plant. It improves the water softening quality of the water and stuff like that. Then we have some liquor operation improvements, tuck pointing at the 64th and Lindale store, and then some new lighting at the 7700 store. 2014, we have approximately $9.7 million of projects, recreation projects, mostly Wood Lake Nature Center and the Community Center, and also the beginning of the funding for a community bench in the years 2014, 15, and 16. They're setting aside money for that. Right-of-way projects, beginning of the 66th Street reconstruction. It's a $31.3 million project. It's spread over 3 years, 2014, 15, and 16. Lindale Avenue Diamond Grind, $50,000. I can't explain what that is, but they do something to the street to make the street better to drive on. Mill and overlay of approximately $1 million of streets. The mill and overlay and the seal coating is all funded through the utility franchise fees, just to point that out. And then public facilities, we've got an interconnect with neighboring communities. And what that is the DNR strongly recommends to communities now. It's not yet required, but that the only water source in Richfield is the water plant. And if something were to happen to that and the supply of water, Richfield would be without water. So what they're strongly recommending is that the city connects with another community, so in case something like that happens, there is a water source and a water supply. And then finally, $250,000 for a lime slaker replacement. Again, I don't know what a lime slaker is, but the last one was replaced back in 2003, so they need to do it again. 2015, approximately $11 million worth of projects. Again, the community band shell, and then an outdoor spray pool feature at the community pool as part of the recreation projects. Right away, it's really, most of that money is the continuation of the 66th Street project, and then again, the seal coating of the bituminous streets. In the public facilities, a self-contained breathing apparatus for the fire department, $180,000, and then the repainting of the Penn Water Tower. That was last repainted in 1996. The interior of the tower was repainted in 2007, I believe. And then there's some liquor operation improvements. I think there's a new roof at the Cedar store, and then I think a new air conditioning unit at the 7700 Lindale store. 2016, approximately $18.5 million worth of projects, and again, the bulk of that $18 million is the final year of the 66th Street reconstruction project. The recreation projects, Taft Lake field improvements, I think there's some drainage improvements and some other improvements to the fields, the expansion of the Vets Park parking lot, and then the addition of a disc golf facility for the recreation, and then right away, as I mentioned, the 66th Street, and then the public facilities is really, there's no new projects planned in 2016. That's just a continuation of existing projects and plan or funding that they have for things to do there. 2017, $7.2 million, expansion of Roosevelt Park. Then there's a new right-of-way project, 65th Street reconstruction, about $4.8 million, and then seal coating again. And then public facilities is the only really new project scheduled in 2017 is water main or mains replacement under I-35W. That's a 1, it should be an I, for $500,000. And then just beyond 2017, this is an extremely large number, but it's basically the bulk of this is a lot of the major roads in the city are planned for reconstruction and refurbishment, and the cost of those is not cheap. The biggest part of this year here is the 77th Street underpass, which is predominantly federal money funding for that and things like that. And I've been told by the engineering staff, even if some of these are county roads, the city does have a portion. I think it's like 20% have to share the cost of these roads. So this number was out last year too. I mean, these have been on here before the last couple of years, so they are working on them and planning on them and things like that. And I think that pretty much ends what I've got. I know I went through that very quick. I'll be happy to try to answer any questions if anybody has any or anything.
Josh, you had a question?
I've got three, and I don't know if Chris, if they're for you or for maybe John. Anybody jump at these? The three questions were, I'll ask them. Sorry. I'll just give you the three and see what we can come up with for answers here. The intercity connector, are we still in the process of negotiating that agreement?
I don't know where they're at on that. I think
We've been at that a while now.
it's been on there a couple times. I think
Yeah.
at least 2 or 3 times. It's not a requirement yet. The DNR strongly recommends it, but I don't know where we're at in the negotiations of that. If you want, I can look into that and see. Or
I'd be curious to know if we could find that out, because it has been on there for a couple of years, and I asked last year who we were negotiating with, and I was told that we were in active negotiations, so I'm just really more a point of curiosity at this point. The next two relate to the Taft and the railroads on the 2013 right-of-way improvements. The Taft Lake, North Richfield, we've got some Minnehaha Creek watershed money that was coming our way to help us with all of that. Is that secured? Is this kind of roped into that project, or is this something we're going ahead with regardless?
I think with that is we were going to issue debt on behalf of the Minnehaha Watershed District, and then the Watershed District would pay the debt.
Okay.
And as far as I know, that is still in process. I think there's some details still being worked out, but I don't think we're probably going to issue the debt, correct me, John, if I'm wrong, until maybe 2013.
Okay.
Well, it's a two-step process. There's the piece that's north of 64th Street. That's the improvements to Taft Lake for water quality, and then some traffic diversion that has to take place for that. That is, I believe, fully funded through Minnehaha Creek Watershed District and other agencies. Some of that was coming from the city, but not a lot. Then the question is, if we're doing everything north of 64th Street, and we've got Richfield Parkway built from 66th Street about a half block north, what do you do with that the remaining block and a half? And the thinking is now is the time to do that. The council has discussed funding options for that. The council has not yet voted on those, though.
Okay. And then the last question was the railroad signing. Looks like we're going to spend some real money on railroad signing. Really? Or that's our bucket of money that's coming from?
The railroad crossing at 70th Street?
Yeah.
Approximately $180,000, $182,000 of that is federal money. MnDOT has applied for a federal grant, and they've received it, and then the balance, I think, is our share, and it's MSA money.
Thanks.
Other questions? Yep, Dennis?
Hi, just a couple questions. With budgets, is there a detailed expenditures report available to people from we got a summary here of some things,
Well, these are all just plans. I don't think there's been really any expenditures on any of some of these projects unless something started in a previous year.
Oh, yeah, I mean on previous years. So
Yeah.
is 2010 detail expenditure available?
Well, there's for a specific project or I mean.
All of them. I mean, I got a budget here that's a summary, including replacement of central garage equipment. What equipment?
That's the dump trucks, the pickup trucks, all the mowers, the things like that. That's the type of equipment, and it's funded through a tax levy. Basically, is what we do to fund it. We've funded that stuff through the past through issuing short-term capital notes, basically issuing debt.
Dennis, are you asking for each of the years, is there more description? Is that what you're asking?
That's what I'm trying
There's an
to ask.
actual capital improvement budget will be produced sometime in November that has each of the project description on it and explains what the project is and shows the funding sources and shows how many years out it goes and things like that. Is that what you're looking for?
And just to clarify, we talk about the capital improvement budget / capital improvement plan. The capital improvement budget is next year's actual budget. All the departments go through and they put the finest number to that they can. The capital improvement plan is that goes out to 2017, 2014 to 2017, and those are fairly loose estimates. So we wouldn't, on those further out ones, I don't know that we would have the level of detail about the expenditures that maybe you're thinking.
Oh, I'm more about thinking about hindsight. So is there a 2010 number available to me now that we can go back and see how that matched up in detail to the summary we get?
Yeah, but I could probably, you know what you want me to find, I can probably put something together or get something printed out and stuff, but you'd have to let me know exactly what you're looking for, because,
It'd be on a project by project
yeah, it'd be a project by
basis.
project basis, yeah, exactly. I mean, so if there's something you specifically want, then let me know.
Somebody would contact you.
Yeah, just give me a call, I mean,
Just
and
a general question.
yeah.
Taxes are up, housing value keeps dropping year after year, and we keep raising taxes to chase that number. Any recommendations on what we can do? Is we watch the schools struggle to breach a gap and homeowners breaching a gap? The city doesn't seem
Well, I
to need
mean,
to
the idea of taxes and things, it's all based on, the services that the city chooses to provide, and it's really a city council policy decision on what they want to do with taxes. I mean, the city manager will prepare a budget and present it to the council with a proposed tax levy, then, it's up to the council then at that point in time to say, we'll provide options, but say, we don't want to do this, yes, we do want to do this, that kind of stuff. I mean, it's really a policy decision of the city council with regard to taxes.
And then just one other thing to mention, I don't know that I can knowledgeably vote for something that I don't know what a lime slacker is. How could I really say yes?
It's used, the soda ash and the lime slaker are both used in the softening process of the water plant when they produce the water and things like that. But if you're looking for a technical definition of it, I can't give you that either. I mean, even based on the information I've got here, I cannot give you that because I'm not a water maintenance person at all.
Yeah, may I make a comment just on that? Of course, I've been through this with the Community Services Commission, okay? And just so that you know, that the ground up starts there, and each department manager as such goes through the process. As to the summary that we get at this point, I will let you know that there's details. Gordon's been there also. And it really takes quite a process to go through it, and many meetings to go through and decide what you're going to prioritize as far as that. At that point, you see all the details as to what is thought to be the proposal for the budget and puts it together. I assume that each of the other departments of that, but I can speak at least to the Community Services Commission and say that's what I've seen. Gordon?
And I would say additionally, Chair Jabs, that capital improvement is one element of the budget dealing with assets that are ultimately depreciable over time.
Right, they're going to last, they're over a certain dollar amount, and they last longer than a 12-month period. They will be capitalized, and they will be depreciated over their useful life.
Right, so this is an asset, these are the assets that the city forecasts potentially having to purchase or improve over the next 5 years, not salaries, not headcount, not anything like that. This is one slice dealing with equipment that we're going to purchase that ultimately is never itemized down to the how many blacktop rollers do we need to do this job, or how many sweepers are necessary to seal coat. This is a ground up estimate from staff using their best look at what they think is going to happen next year and over the next 5 years.
Chair Jabs.
Tom?
I can back up what you were saying, and both Rick and I had worked on the outdoor pool project, and that has been planned out almost since day one, that there would be a repayment, but also then certain improvements to the pool would take place every few years. The splash pad, for instance, is something that has been on the planning for the outdoor pool for quite a while, and those projects just get folded out over a period of years. I do have one question specifically about the water tower on Penn. I know that's planned out to 2015. We got a couple of years yet to be there. Would that be a complete sandblast of the tower again? Do they anticipate doing that? The paint does not look.
I don't know how 100%, but I would assume that's what they did. I think they just completed that on the Logan Tower, I think, last year. So I would assume they're going to sandblast and then paint. I think that's probably, I'm not a professional painter. That's probably the best process to use and things like that. And then, like I said, I'm pretty sure it was last done in 1996. So that's about, almost 20 years.
So it has been quite a while
Yeah.
ago. But if I remember correctly, what you're anticipating, 500,000, wasn't all that different than it was then either, so.
That might be a little low. I'm guessing the closer we get to 2016, that's going to be amped up a little bit, especially based on what they paid for the Logan Tower, which seems was a little more than 500,000 for the Logan. I know they did some other work on the Logan Tower
Right.
too, but I think it's probably that might be amped up, and that all comes out of the the water fund that pays for that too.
Right. Okay, I certainly would like you to keep the water tower in good shape. I mean, Richfield Water is probably
Well,
the best.
I know the utility superintendent would too. I mean,
Yeah.
he's very meticulous about his all the infrastructure of the water utility and sewer utility.
Okay, other questions? Bob?
You had mentioned, I believe, that the liquor store pays for the recreation open space. Am I correct in assuming that that is special revenue on this?
Yes. Yeah, that basically the liquor fund transfers money into a special revenue fund, liquor contribution fund, and then through the transitory ordinance process, that's how the approval is finalized for the funding of the projects budgeted.
Well, in the course of these 5 years that you have here, some years have, one has 10 revenue sources, one has as few as 5.
In the recreation open space, or?
No,
Oh.
in the whole budget.
Oh, okay.
Why that discrepancy? And if you're...
Well, each project is taken on its own, and the staff that brings up the project, they determine the funding sources for that. I mean, there's numerous funding sources throughout. There's federal money, there's state money, MSA money, there's taxes, tax levy, there's the special revenue funds, there's user fees, which are akin to, the utility money. The utility funds would pay for that. Those are the user fees and things like that. So does that answer your question, or?
A lot of it is speculative. Depending
I don't know
on
if
if
it's-
you
I don't know
get
if
the
spec-
grant or not, or those
Well,
kinds
I
of
mean,
things.
yeah, I mean, but you remember, this is a plan and it's out there, and they're fine-tuned the closer it gets to the year that they plan on, or the hope to do it and things like that. I mean, a project's not gonna happen unless they've got the funding.
Well, and I think I've asked before that if all of these things have been approved, and the answer is no. All of these projects that you have.
Well,
these
a lot of them have to go
developments
through council approval, and they go through
That's
the
what I'm-
budget process
right,
and things
they're-
like
they're-
that, yeah.
They're blue sky at this point. They're a wish. This is a wish list.
They're a wish, but they're also a plan. I mean,
Well-
if you look at some of the road projects on there, I mean, that's not a wish. Those are a plan to get done. I mean, they'd like to get those done. I mean, you can think of it as a plan or a wish, I guess. But I think, like talking to the engineers, that I think they'd like think of it more of a plan than a wish.
Well, what I'm suggesting is that I agree with Mr. Schuler. There's no way we can digest all of this and come up with an informed decision, because so much of it is subject to fluctuation.
But you need to remember that the main role of the planning commission with the capital improvement budget and plan is, does it comply with the comprehensive plan? That's what you're voting on. You're not voting on whether you approve of the project or whether the project's viable or feasible. You're voting on whether it complies with the city's comprehensive plan. That is the role of the planning commission.
Well, today I received this. This was the first chance I got to look at this, was today. It's not anybody's fault here. It's mine, because even retired people take a vacation once in a while. But the point is, there's no way, and I think that's what Mr. Schuler was saying, there's no way I can make an informed decision about this, because I just haven't had enough time to look at what's here and ask even a whole bunch of presumably intelligent questions. So, but it's a broad picture, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, rather
Yeah.
than hard numbers.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Gordon?
Chair Jabs, I move that we approve the 2014 to 2017 capital improvement plan and adopt a resolution finding that the 2013 capital improvement budget and the 2014 through 2017 capital improvement programs are consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Seconded.
Okay. It's been a motion and a second. Any discussion? I guess my point of discussion would be that a lot of these things are recurring, and and if you watch the plan as you watch it evolve over the 5 years, you're seeing a lot of the same things over and over again because, of course, the funding has not taken place or it's still working on being finished. So from a perspective of having to review it and actually associate it to the comp plan, I think that you could, at least I could, adequately take the assumptions with a few exceptions as to the definitions that weren't given. But overall, I think it's pretty much the same that's been running each year. There's a few new things, but most of it is there. So that'd be my only comment.
Chair Jans, just to make a comment, I would urge you to vote no as an opportunity to say you're tired of seeing your taxes go up and work to find a better way for us to work within the comprehensive plan to live, work, and play because rising taxes prohibit that for me.
Okay, any other discussion?
I would suggest that Committee Member Schuler consider running for City Council if he wants to make those decisions rather than Planning Commission.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, hearing none, let's hear the vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? No. Okay, passes. Thank you very much. Okay, on to the next item is approval of the rescheduling of the regular August Planning Commission study session from August 13th to August 6th, starting at 5:30. Staff.
Yeah, the primary election, the way that that's scheduled, the city council has been forced to reschedule their August 14th meeting to August 13th. So as to not conflict with the council meeting, staff is proposing that the Planning Commission study session be rescheduled to Monday, August 6th. Furthermore, this meeting is scheduled to be the commission's annual had been biking tour. This year we're suggesting that it be a walking tour for the first time. And I believe it's a walk around the lakes at Lindale area at 66th and Lindale. And so staff is also recommending that in addition to the date change, that the time be changed from 7 p.m. to 5:30 p.m.
Okay. Any questions? If not, I ask for a motion.
Moved.
Second.
Okay. Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Okay. Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries. Thank you. Okay, moving on to public hearing. It's consideration of one, a comprehensive plan amendment, changing the designation of the property from high-density residential to community commercial/office. 2, rezone the property from mixed-use community to planned mixed use. And 3, final development plan and conditional use permit for an auto body shop at 301 West 77th Street. Staff?
I'm going to make the presentation from here so that I can note the map. In 1992, the Richfield HRA purchased the property at 301 77th Street West with the intention of marketing the property for a restaurant. There were some significant impediments to restaurant development at this location, and despite marketing efforts, the site has remained vacant. In 2002, staff requested reassurance from the HRA that the desired use of the site was for a restaurant or, in special circumstances, for a Richfield business that is being displaced due to redevelopment. The HRA agreed that this was still their intent. In 2009, Accessible Space Incorporated and Twin City Christian Homes proposed the development of an accessible, affordable 51-unit housing project for low-income seniors at this site. The City Council approved both comprehensive plan and zoning amendments related to this request. However, the project fell through because they did not receive their funding. Richfield Bloomington Honda is interested in expanding their dealership in Richfield. In order to do so, Richfield Bloomington Honda has proposed to purchase land currently owned by LaMetri Auto Body. Really, the entire block between Richfield Bloomington Honda and the Sheraton Four Points Hotel is all owned by LaMetri, so that would include the body shop, the Tires Plus, the Baby USA, and I believe an additional vacant space in that building. LaMetri is willing to sell their property, provided that a new location for their collision repair business can be found within the immediate area. On June 18th, the HRA granted Lumetri permission to submit an application for the redevelopment of the property at 301 West 77th Street. The actual sale of the property would be considered in July, and this permission does not obligate the HRA to sell the land yet. So, just going through some of the policy issues, the 494 plan that was undertaken in 2005 envisions the area as a complete community that is walkable, compact, and transit-friendly. In order to achieve this, the plan recommends area of higher density residential and commercial development to be interspersed throughout the corridor, allowing for a mutually beneficial relationship. The property at 301 West 77th Street was initially was originally designated as regional commercial office in the comp plan, but was re-guided for high-density residential use when ASI residential project was proposed. The site is in a transitional area between an area that's guided for commercial use and one that is guided for residential use. Either a commercial or a residential designation could be appropriate for the site. The more appropriate question is how any particular use will impact adjacent properties. The impact on current users and on potential redevelopment in the area should be taken into consideration. With regard to zoning code requirements, planned unit developments, which this is being proposed as, are intended to encourage the efficient use of land and resources and to encourage innovation in planning and building. PUDs, or planned unit developments, provide flexibility in the application of dimensional requirements, setbacks, density, and land uses if the proposed development is well designed and can be successfully integrated into the neighborhood. The guiding district for the proposed planned mixed use development is the mixed use community district. Some of the relevant purposes of the mixed use districts are to guide development in ways that adapt to market and transportation changes, to provide appropriate transitions between uses, to promote pedestrian and bicycle connectivity, and discourage large surface parking areas, and to encourage high-quality architectural and landscape development. The proposed development does deviate from the following guiding district requirements. The first is that buildings are required to be a minimum of 2 stories, and what's being proposed is only 1. Secondly, auto, mechanical, and body repair uses are required to be set back 15 to 25 feet from residentially zoned property. While the railroad property is zoned residential, it is guided for future park or trail use. The railroad property is approximately 45 feet wide and provides the required buffer on its site between the site and the residentially guided former public works facility. A minimum buffer of 15 feet is required to separate auto, mechanical, and body repair uses from all abutting parcels. This requirement is not met along the southernmost property line. However, the location of the Candlewood Hotel in relation to this area largely addresses the intent of this requirement. Staff does recommend that trees be required in the landscaping area along the privacy fence in order to provide some screening of damaged vehicles for the occupants of the hotel's upper floors. Staff believes that this addition would also more effectively meet the requirement that all vehicles awaiting repair be stored in appropriately screened areas. Developments are required to provide safe pedestrian and bicycle passage. Staff acknowledges that the proposal does not make changes to the existing curb cut, but recommends that the redevelopment require an adjustment to make this crossing safer. And we'll go through the site plan in a second and point out some of these things. The proposed lighting plan does not meet requirements. The proposed poles exceed height limitations. A revised photometric plan using poles that meet requirements should be provided for staff review. Darkly tinted windows or any windows that prevent two-way visibility are prohibited as ground floor windows along the street facades. The applicant has stated that the windows will be tinted for sun. It should be clear to everybody that two-way visibility is required. The proposal does not include what's termed in the 494 plan as a pedestrian spine. The code calls for a major pedestrian area of usable open space to be the central organizing element that links properties within the 494 corridor. Given the proximity of the railroad tracks, we feel that this is not realistic for the site. And actually, at this point, I am just going to go through the site plan really quickly. This is the entire lot with 77th Street along the northern edge of the plan and the Candlewood Hotel to the south. You can see the Candlewood Hotel is an L-shaped building. You can see perhaps the edge of the wing here of the L. This is a drive aisle that's governed by a cross-access agreement between this property and the Candlewood Hotel. What that cross-access agreement states is that Candlewood will have access to 77th Street through this drive aisle. There's also a shared parking agreement. As we had stated, this was contemplated to be a restaurant parcel. The thinking was that a hotel and a restaurant have offsetting parking demands, especially most types of restaurants, their peak demand time is at the lunch hour when a hotel might be relatively empty, and then late in the evening when a hotel fills up is when a lot of the peak demand for restaurants starts to decline. So there are 25 spaces that the hotel is allowed to use on this property and 25 spaces that this property owner is allowed to use on the hotel property. So those are in place. The location of the drive aisle is really set by a couple of things. One is by this agreement, but secondly is by practicality. The drive aisle could not be moved further to the west because, as I said, the Candlewood Hotel building comes to this point. If you were to move it further to the west, that would cause some very sharp turning movements to get around the building. It would cause headlights going into rooms and those kinds of things. It can't move further to the east either because of the fear that vehicles wanting to turn left or south into the property would end up stacking on the railroad tracks. So the thinking is the drive aisle is where it is and can't be moved. One of the resulting effects of that is that this piece of the property between Richfield, Bloomington, Honda, and the drive aisle is fairly small, becomes more difficult to use. And in most of the discussions we've had with developers over the years, this has been shown as a parking field for that reason, with a building focused on this area, which is what Lumetri is proposing. They're showing a 19,400 square foot, as I said, auto body shop. They can perhaps come up and tell you a little bit about how the operations would work, where employees would park, where damaged vehicles would be, and those kinds of things. I will tell you that there is one issue of that we have to work through with Lumetri, and that is our engineering department feels it's inappropriate to have the 3 parking spaces that are shown here and the 2 or 3 spaces that are shown here onto a drive aisle. They don't like having backing movements and parking movements going into the drive aisle. I don't think that these 3 spaces are going to be an issue. They can just be reoriented into the interior lot here. That's just something we'll have to work through. These spaces along here, 2 of them are shown as handicap spaces. I'm hoping that something can be negotiated with our Public Works Department where perhaps we could have 1 or maybe 2 parallel handicap spaces that would alleviate their concerns about movements in and out of the drive aisle, but that's something we'll have to continue to work through. So that's in the staff report under additional requirements. That's the first of those. The second is that the minimum right-of-way behind the curb must be 14 feet, according to the Public Works Department. So the applicant, Lumetri, would have to dedicate an additional 1.5 to 2 feet of right-of-way along 77th Street. And that's just to give the Public Works Department the area that they need for sidewalks, for snow storage, for underground utilities and those kinds of things. And finally, that any ash trees within the city right-of-way must be removed and replaced with a city-approved variety. And this is part of our forester's ongoing plan to avoid any situations with the emerald ash borer and with a monoculture that we have along 77th Street. I'm going to go through the findings necessary for approval of a PUD application and the findings for the conditional use permit. These are a little lengthy and wordy, so bear with me. On the findings for a PUD, first is that the proposed development conforms to the goals and objectives of the comprehensive plan and any applicable redevelopment plans for the neighborhood. The applicant has applied for a comprehensive plan amendment that would change the designation of this property from high density residential to community commercial / office. The site is in a transitional area between an area that is guided for regional commercial use and one that is guided for residential use. And as I had said before, really, that's part of what you're doing here is determining what that appropriate buffer or transition would be. Secondly, that the proposed development is designed in such a manner as to form a desirable and unified environment within its own boundaries. Staff feels that this requirement is met. Number 3, that the development is in substantial conformance with the purpose and intent of the guiding district, and departures from the guiding district regulations are justified. The development is in substantial compliance with the intent of the guiding MUC district. Deviations are related to the unique characteristics of the site, particularly the proximity of the railroad and the inability to move the existing drive entry. Staff does feel that additional trees in the landscape area along the privacy fence would more effectively meet the intent of buffering. Number 4, the development will not create an excessive burden on parks, schools, streets, or other public facilities. We see no such impact. Number 5, the development will not have undue adverse impacts on neighboring properties. The proposed building and site are attractively designed with the addition of landscaping to screen damaged vehicles from the view of the hotel guests. Staff does not believe the proposed development will have undue impacts on neighboring properties. I'm going to stop there for a second, and I'm not sure, this is a public hearing, and mailed notice was sent out to all property owners within 350 feet, which would include the Candlewood Hotel. I'm not sure if there is anybody here from Candlewood. I don't believe so. I can tell you that staff did go and talk with the on-site management folks at Candlewood, and we have talked with their parent company folks in Atlanta. As you might imagine, there are always issues with kind of prejudices or images that you cook up in your head. And when we talked with the on-site management for Candlewood, we talked to them about an auto body use, purchasing that site. And then we went on to talk to them about all the design features, all the landscaping, all of those things. I don't think that they heard anything after auto body use, and they were fairly negative about it. When we talked with the folks in Atlanta, I got the impression that this was really too remote and far away for them to care a whole lot about. So that's just the impression that I got. Number 6, the terms and conditions proposed to maintain the integrity of the plan are sufficient to protect the public interest. The final development plan, which establishes the terms and conditions of the development, meets this requirement. Again, these are now the findings necessary to issue a conditional use permit, as this is a conditional use. And the ones that are addressed above, I'm just going to skip. Number 2, the proposed use is consistent with the purposes of the zoning code and the purposes of the zoning district. Some of the relevant purposes of the mixed-use district are to guide development in ways that adapt to market and transportation changes, to provide appropriate transition between uses, and to promote pedestrian bicycle connectivity and discourage large surface parking areas. The proposed use is largely consistent with these purposes. The proposed use is consistent with any officially adopted redevelopment plans or urban design guidelines. The I-494 corridor study proposed a mix of land uses that would be established in a pedestrian-friendly development pattern. While the proposed development specifically serves automobiles, surface parking has been reduced in favor of additional green space, and a pedestrian connection from 77th Street to the Candlewood Hotel has been created. And that is identified here. There's pervious pavers here. There's also pervious pavers here acting as walkways. And then you can see the striped marks for pedestrian walkways. So there are a number of ways for a pedestrian to get from 77th Street to the hotel. The proposed use is or will be in compliance with the performance standards specified in Section 544 of the Code. The proposed development is in substantial compliance with the performance standards. Deviations are related to, again, the unique characteristics of the site. And again, staff is recommending that additional landscaping be required along the northern privacy fence and some changes made to the lighting plan. Number 5, the proposed use will not have we've covered this one, sorry. Number 7, that there is a public need for such use at the proposed property. Lumetri Collision has operated successfully in this area for many years. They could probably tell you exactly how many. The proposed location is less than 500 feet away from their current location. And the proposed use meets or will meet all specific conditions set by the code for granting of such CUP, and this requirement is met. With that, there are a number of stipulations of approval that are listed out there. Most of those I've addressed in one way or another in the staff report. So I think staff would stand for any questions you might have. And again, the applicant is here.
Okay, questions of staff first. Okay, seeing none. This is a public hearing, and if the applicant would wish to get up and add any thoughts to this, this would be a great time.
Good evening. My name is Richard Lumetri. I've run, Lumetri's Collision in the city of Richfield since 1981. Prior to that, out of a home. I guess I'm here to answer any concerns or questions you might have. I think it's a nice project. It's better than where we're at now, and it'll allow Honda to expand, and we are both business partners, so that's why we wanted to stay in the same area.
Well, let me just ask a question relative to Candlewood, since they're not here. How do you feel that you fit in with and coexist with them and enhance their setting as such?
Well, I think it's the landscape plan and the design of the building is by far better looking than a McDonald's or a Burger King. I don't know what type of restaurant they planned on putting in there. We're pretty well screened from their business, and I don't see where there'd be a problem. We're down half a block away now, so I can't see that there'd be a problem or a dislike of the looks of the building. It's a very professional looking building.
Bob?
Along those same lines, can you describe the nature of your work? Is there a lot of noise? What are your hours of operation? Is there a paint odor that's going to emanate from there?
Well,
I'm really disappointed that Candlewood isn't here.
Right. Our hours are like 6 to 7 Monday through Friday, 8 to 2 on Saturday. All work is done inside the building. Nothing's done outside. As concerned to paint odors and stuff, we have the top of the line booths, filters. We're EPA approved. We're hazardous waste generator licensed. We never had a complaint about paint odors.
Do you have a lot of vehicles that sit outside? Are they,
No, everything that, excuse me, we take in, comes in on a Monday, worked on through the week, and is delivered on a Friday. And we try to schedule the work as we can get it done and get it out the door, so we don't like cars sitting around. We do have screen parking for damaged cars. Sometimes something come in and sit for 2-3 days because it was totaled, and then the insurance companies haven't picked up. But we do have an area that will be screened, and that's where they'll be contained.
So does that mean, I drive past there several times on the weekends, and there's always usually 2 or 3 vehicles out there that have been brought in? Does that mean that you're going to change your policy and that those will
Well,
be
yeah,
taken
we're
in?
really tight where we're at. We don't have adequate parking, and or do we have a screened storage area at all?
Okay. Other questions?
Were there any issues with staff's recommendation around using trees or overstory trees to block on the backside? Did you, from a plan perspective, did you have issues with any of staff's recommendations on your site plan?
No, I guess the 2 issues you brought up, I was the setback from the street. I guess I went by some previous meetings we had that can be adjusted. That's not a problem. The thing with the 90-degree parking is that that drive lane goes all the way down to the frontage road where Candlewood has their front office, and they have 90-degree parking all along that drive lane. So that's what made us decide that we could also have 90-degree parking. So I guess I'm open for discussion, but it's not any different than what Candlewood already has.
Other questions? Bob?
with regard to that shared parking, is that something that you have discussed with Candlewood, or is that in the land?
Well, it was part of the easement agreement that was in place when I looked at the property. It was something that was prior development. But I guess I like the idea because the end part of the hotel is here, and there's an entrance there, and I know Candlewood's customers are going to want to park closest to that entrance. So if we dissolve the cross easement, then either I have to put a barrier up or threaten to tow cars of their customers, and I prefer not. If they want to use those stalls, fine, then we'll just compensate within their parking.
I'm a little confused. You talked about the possibility of towing cars that are parked there?
No, I'm just saying that if we were to do away with the cross easement, so that means that their customers can't park in my lot, and I can't park in their lot.
Okay.
But I know their customers are going to tend to park closest to the entrance to their room, which is on the north end of the building.
Right.
So if that was to dissolve in order to keep my parking stalls clean or available to myself, I would have to set up some system to keep them out of those stalls. But with the cross easement, it's something that don't have to worry about. Because if they can park there because they have access to 25 of my stalls, and if those are filled, my employees or customers can access and use 25 of their stalls.
Is there a theoretical division now?
There's
Or
not
an
a
actual
mark,
division?
there's no marking of actual stalls, no.
You think it'll work?
Oh, yeah. Because most hotels or clientele come in the evenings, leave in the mornings. We're open in the morning and we go home in the evening. So the parking should be, open to both sides.
Okay, other questions? Yes.
Just help me verify, there was a question about, it's a one-story building, is that right? That you're
Yeah, it's
proposing?
15 feet high.
And two-way glass was a problem?
No, they asked that we couldn't use
Tinted.
blackout tinted glass.
Yeah.
This is tinted glass, that's what I'm planning on using.
So it's not blackout.
No,
So really the only question is the
it's just
two-story.
regular tinted glass.
Okay, any other questions?
I just want to clarify, make sure, if you were to utilize the 25 parking spaces, none of those 25 parking spaces would be used with a disabled car or
No.
one that you're going to repair on. It's strictly employee or customer
Customer
use.
parking, yes.
That's what I thought, but I just thought I'd ask. Thank you.
Okay, I just need one more clarification. So I just want to make sure about this parking situation of cars that are towed in. Can you explain that to me one more time? What you're going to do with them?
Well, on the south area of the building here
Okay,
is a fenced screen area, and those were the park or storage of the damaged cars would go.
okay. So nothing will be facing the 77th Street
No.
per se?
And then in the evenings, we usually pull everything inside just for
Okay.
security reasons.
And typically, what I've seen, first of all, I'll say you keep your site really looking nice, so I don't have too much of an issue with that. I just want to make sure that the damaged vehicles aren't on 77th Street. That's the
Right.
big thing.
I understand that.
Sorry? Anything else? Okay. Anyone in the public? Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Anyone in the public that has a comment? Come on up, please state your name and address and sign in. I think there's a sheet over there, right, John?
I believe so. No sheet?
No sheet.
Okay. There will be.
Okay. I'm getting quite comfortable at public hearings. Thank you.
Several times.
Okay. I'm Joe Hoover at 7627 Harriet Avenue. So I'm a neighbor very very close by Lemaitrie's, and I'm also a former customer, as is my uncle. Our family's lived there since 1947. My uncle was a customer. I'm a customer. I like your business. You do great work. I have to say I'm very in supportive of this, and I've kind of looked over the plans. Looks great. I'm really happy. I'm very happy that I can't say welcome to Richfield, but I'm really happy that you're choosing to stay in Richfield, that, it's a great place to do business. I think a lot of people find that out. It's great that you're here, and it's great that you're choosing to stay here. The couple of design, I've talked with the neighbors on this, on 76 and Harriet, and several of the neighbors, and the reactions are one of two. One is benign, like, eh. The other one is very positive. Very happy that you're staying here. A couple of things, and one is on lighting, and I think that was brought up. And one of the things, this is a concern mostly just in general on 77th Street, because it is just like daylight almost 24 hours a day. That the business use drop-down lighting or flat lens lighting, that it doesn't create light pollution in the neighborhoods. And part of it, you're talking about landscaping for the business, but I'd also like the city to consider landscaping, because one of the things there, a lot of the trees along the sound wall have died, and those have provided us some of the best barrier to a lot of the light that's going on. I'd like to see the city replace the trees that have died along the walls. And, in fact, a lot of the husks are still there for the trees. They haven't even cut them down yet. But so I think that's important. The only thing that I did hear about is the last two houses on the end have occasionally picked up odors. And just be concerned of that in developing the new facility. But it hasn't been anything like really major concern or anything like that. And it just seems to when there's probably heavy painting and maybe which way the wind is blowing at that point. But otherwise, from what I've heard from the neighborhood, it seems very positive. And again, for myself, I'm very happy that you're choosing to stay here. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who wishes to speak to this?
Good evening, Chair Jabs and Commissioner. My name is Tim Carter. I'm the managing partner at Richfield Bloomington Honda right next door, and I'm here to talk on behalf of 90 employees that work at Richfield Bloomington Honda, and also my parent company, Tom Wood Incorporated, out of Indianapolis. We're in full support of this project for two reasons. One is we want to be a good business neighbor to these guys. We've been in business with them since 1986, and we account for a large percentage of each other's business right here in Richfield. And they're everything that gentleman just said. They're a very high quality, high class organization. We want to continue doing business with them. We also would like them to be at that spot. We want to be as close to them as possible because of that high percentage. That Candlewood spot, I would actually like to see, I know I have no influence on this, but I would actually like to see an easement access between our two properties so I wouldn't have to drive out onto 77th and they wouldn't have to drive out onto 77th. It would just make it a lot easier. So that's my pitch on that, Mr. Director Stark. Also, we are planning to redevelop our area, and we do have an agreement that's pending with Mr. Lemaitre on expanding out down to the Four Seasons Hotel, and we're not asking for TIF, we're not going to a bank, we're ready to roll on this thing. And the longer it takes to get this done, we want to start construction in the spring of a year and end the spring of the next year, but we don't want to start in fall. And we're right up to that timeline now where our original estimation when we were talking with Mr. Lemaitre, we could start spring of 13, open the doors spring of 14. Now it's looking like it's going to be pushed back a year unless we can get this thing approved real quickly. And the longer we wait, as you guys know, in redevelopment, every year that goes by, your cost just keeps going up. And we're in multiple millions in our project, so I don't want to add to that. That to me is a lot of money, so we got to carry that cost. So the timing, to me, we have a very high sense of urgency. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who wishes to speak to this? Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, could I ask for a motion?
Public hearing.
Second.
Thank you. A motion and a second to close the public hearing. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Discussion?
Yeah, can I ask a question, please? The staff, Director Stark. You mentioned the restaurant that was originally proposed on this site. I believe it was a Culver's. And that we've been unsuccessful at attracting other restaurant entities to come in, and there seem to be problems with that. Could you elaborate a bit on what you think the problems are for that particular area in attracting a restaurant?
Sure. I can tell you what I know, and I can tell you what I've heard. What I know is that when I first came to the city of Richfield in 1998, one of my first charges was to get a restaurant on this site. We had worked with a broker on listing the site, which we don't typically do with our sites because it had been marketed at that point in time for 3 or 4 years without a broker unsuccessfully. So we brought a broker aboard, went out and made a pitch to every restaurant that they had contacts with or that they could make a contact with. And that occurred from 98 to about 2001 without much success, 2001, 2002, without much success. What I was told by the broker was that restaurant developers look at 3 things. First, they look at visibility particularly from an interstate highway. You cannot see the piece of property from 494. There is some signage you can see, but you wouldn't see the actual building, so that was problematic. 2 is accessibility, and they have formulas they developed that say somebody will drive this far off of interstate, make this many turning movements, and the difficulties in getting to the site from 494 were cited that it was too far off of Lindale. And then third is demographics. You know, they have their model, and every restaurant is different, whether it's a quarter mile or a third of a mile or half of a mile. But they'll put a concentric ring around the site. to those specifications. Then they'll look at incomes, they'll look at employment within that area, and that this site didn't meet the criteria for the restaurants. So that's what I was told, both by the broker and by specific restaurants that I had spoken with. In 2002, I read in the one of the real estate journals that this new restaurant called Culver's was coming to the Twin Cities market, and they listed the name of the franchisee that had been designated for the Twin Cities. By this point in time, we had quit paying the broker because we weren't seeing success there. So I took it upon myself to work with Culver's. I worked with Culver's for about 2 years, a year and a half maybe, to see if they could make something work on that site. The person that was designated as the Twin Cities franchisee at that point in time ultimately made a pitch to the real estate committee of Culver's and the decision makers, and was turned down because of all the things I had just mentioned: access, visibility, and this, they call it rooftops, whatever is going on in this quarter mile or third mile area. That was in 2004. In 2005, I quit working for the city for 2 years. When I came back, what I had heard was that another Culver's franchisee, a second Culver's franchisee, had popped up in the Twin Cities. Apparently, Culver's had loosened their restrictions and was allowing more franchisees in. That this person had identified an interest in the site and was told by staff that they could not go there because it was not 2 stories, which was required in the 494 plan. I don't know if Culver's ever took this to their real estate commission. I don't know if Culver's corporate signed off on the site. That's what I can tell you about the history there. Again, it was mentioned in the staff report that the Accessible Space Incorporated did get many of the preliminary approvals for a 52-unit affordable senior housing development there. There were some economies of scale that worked for them because it was going to be in conjunction with Twin City Christian Homes, which operates Main Street Village just a block away. And I think that's a large part of why that was approved. But again, that fell through because the funding fell through. So that's a little bit I can tell you about the history.
My concern is this, and I too have been a unfortunate customer of Mr. Lemaitre, and the service was impeccable. I have no problem with that. And for the record, my total pickup was only there for 3 days before it was exited out. My concern is this. We've visited this spot now, this particular location, on several times. Last time we changed from a commercial designation to a housing designation. Now we're being asked to come back. We have also looked at a housing to the east of there, the woodchip pile lot. We have tried over the years to do something with this area, the garage site, and so on. We have a dilemma. I don't think we quite know really what we want in that area. I'm reluctant to support this, not totally based on the merits of this or non-merits, but rather we're being asked to change the designation that we've changed previously, and it seems to me to indicate a lot of indecision with what to do with this property. We heard earlier in a discussion of the housing programs here in Richfield. Richfield is location, location, location. But unfortunately, we have not become destination, destination, destination. And I find that disturbing. I travel a great deal in my job. I go to areas where the Candlewood Suite, or like where the Candlewood Suites is. I stay in those types of hotels. I'm absolutely baffled why there isn't a restaurant in that area and why another one hasn't looked at it. I go to areas all the time that are backed up against industrial, light industrial and so on, and they have restaurants. And I have to make a lot of turns and twists and get out MapQuest and whatever to get to restaurants. Visibility isn't always that great a consideration, so I'm truly baffled why we haven't been able to get that desired restaurant in there. But I'm more concerned right now in that we have pressure on us, our comp plan from various corners, the Met Council not to be trivialized, asking for more housing. I don't see them asking for more body shops. And right now we have this property. We have a surrounding area that seems to be in flux and indecision. And this is right in the crux of it. And right now I'm very reluctant to visit that question without having more of a comprehensive, no pun intended, study of this area and finally decide just what it is we need to do with it that is going to be the best for Richfield.
Chair Jobs.
Sure, go ahead.
So I candidly think it's less about indecision and more about wishing that our pig was a cow. There's been 20 years.
You put lipstick on either one of them, there's still a cow or a pig.
But my point is, it's been 20 years where we've hoped for the thing that we think should go there to show up there. But in the end, to Director Stark's point, the math has never worked in our favor relative to the equations used from an economic development perspective. And in this case, although we wished it to be a restaurant, 20 years later it's still not a restaurant. We, to your point, looked at potentially housing. Housing didn't work. We could maybe hang out for another 5 or 10 years hoping that it'll turn into housing as well. I think in this instance we have a long-standing Richfield business with an opportunity to improve, and in fact 2 of them. To Dennis's earlier point around expanding tax base, I think encouraging economic development is in all of our interests.
Okay, and I would agree. I think there's some merit there to your argument. I do want to then point out that if one of the reasons why we haven't been able to get a restaurant in that location are some of the factors that Director Stark has pointed out, and the restaurants and their marketing departments, who look very hard at this, are looking at income level, then perhaps we ought to also be very wary of what we do on the lot east of there in terms of housing. The only proposal we've had there is a 100% affordable, even at kind of a lower rate. I think we need to keep this all in mind. Exactly how is this area going to develop and be best for Richfield? Yes, increasing the tax base, but I think we need to, be very thoughtful of this, not just because somebody has come forward and they're a favorite son and a good body shop and a good auto dealer or whatever, but is this going to be the best decision for Richfield? We're going to have to live with this for quite a while, and it's going to have an effect on what else goes on in that area.
Yes, you're right.
Thank
To your point, though, as you think about the whole scenario on 77th Street, when that first proposal came through, I know I wasn't too in favor of it. And I keep on thinking about what happens to 77th Street in the long vision as we get that underneath Cedar and we start making that a much more busy street. And in my mind, I never have felt, at least based on what the comprehensive plan shows me, that in fact this area was very good for housing, okay? Only because I thought it was a very unsafe atmosphere. Even now, at 40 miles per hour, I think it speeds up to at that point.
Sure.
So it's a pretty busy spot of traffic. Here's what I see. And I don't think it's a favorite son, so don't put me in that category, but I do think that they're very good businesses within the city. And I think that for them to be able to expand and increase employment in the city and increase our base is much more advantageous than us going and saying that we should wait around for a restaurant or whatever it is to come into that area. my main concern with this proposal as such was to make sure that the cars don't come out on 77. And I think because that would be my only hesitance relative to Candlewood, because I think they deserve as good of a look and as good of an atmosphere from the street as they do from the freeway. So I think that's big. I don't want someone to come in and say, I'm not going to Candlewood because they've got dumpy cars sitting in there. Although, again, I say you guys have done a heck of a job to make sure it looks very nice, and I know that you'll live up to it. So from my perspective, if I look at this, I don't see a restaurant there. And just thinking about that whole pathway, if we think down the road, that street only gets busier, and hopefully something will come along at that point where we can incorporate it, but still, the traffic levels that will be there once that flies through is going to change that whole distinction. So at first I was a little opposed, only because of the cars, but at this point I think it's much more important for us to look at the full scheme of this and look at what it brings to us as far as new business and existing business, but in a greater level. So that's where I stand.
Chair James, just add one final thought. Just from an urban design standpoint, this is a very difficult site. One of the terms that we use are hard edges, and a hard edge can be a lot of things. On this site, 77th Street is a hard edge. There's no need to have a transition to anything onto 77th Street because of that. As it functions now, the railroad is a hard edge. We've been in discussion with the railroad for the last 15 years about what their plans are. And during all those discussions over 15 years, the answer has always been the same, and that is that they plan on operating as a railroad forever. So that's a hard edge as it functions right now. To the south, obviously 494 is a hard edge, but the Candlewood Hotel is a hard edge. That's not going anywhere. And then again to the west with the existing uses that are there. So this area isn't really, as it stands, it isn't going to be a transition between any two things. Where we have to start worrying about transitions are beyond the railroad tracks. From the railroad tracks, then how do we start to transition into the residential uses that are further on down there? This site is really an isolated site and doesn't lend itself to comprehensive planning in the ways that almost every other site would. So I just wanted to add that.
Okay, other comments? Sure.
Quick question. All right, so Staff Member Stark, what was the hang up about the 2 stories?
Well, that was part of the 494 plan, which stated that the ideal, actually the requirement, was that sites along 494 be developed with buildings 2 stories or greater as a way of capitalizing on 494 and 77th Street, the desire for people to be there and the density that was envisioned there. And quite frankly, my predecessor was very strict on that. That's what the plan said. That's what's going to happen there. I tend to be a little more site-specific, and I think that on sites that lend themselves that way, such as the Menards site, that's appropriate. On this site, I can't figure out how you could possibly have 2 stories on this site and still park all of the people that you would need to park for 2 stories without doing an underground parking garage. And the thought of doing an underground parking garage on this site with the size of it and how the site could be utilized just doesn't make any sense to me. So, I don't have a hang-up of 2 stories on this particular site. And that's why staff is recommending that the PUD be granted, even though it doesn't achieve that goal.
Thank you.
Sure, Jeff. Oh, Josh.
So, 2 things here. John, just a note, if you could forward the comment that was made by Mr. Hoover regarding the forestry issues along the sound wall there. It's my recollection that the businesses there pay a slightly higher cost for the prettiness that exists along that sidewall.
And I guess my question would be, I don't know if you've reported that to anybody or, that would be the first step. So if there were specific trees, I do know that they are going through an entire process with the various diseases that are going around, whether it's Dutch elm or emerald ash borer or whatever, they're thinning out some trees and they're introducing them later. That process doesn't always go as fast as people would like to see it happen. But any specific trees, you can just forward on to me and I'll make sure they understand it.
And then I guess if there wasn't any other comments, I'd move the recommended actions conditioned on staff's further
I
recommendations.
have some, I have
Yeah,
some.
I'm going to hold up for just a second,
Okay.
Robert.
Okay, so let's say hypothetically we do this, and we switch this designation back to the more commercial that it was at one time. We get rid of the housing that's there now. What are we going to do with the wood chip pile? Right now, if I remember correctly, the only proposal we've had for that was housing. How would housing fit into right next to this shop and the railroad tracks?
Well, if I just to talk about this, I think John just said that the railroad tracks are kind of the buffer. And at that point, you look at it in a different direction and start easing it into the neighborhood as such.
Yeah,
So that's what I heard.
I would agree with Commissioner Rubline that, for lack of a better term, we've floundered a little bit in this area, and that we do need to have some serious discussions about what this area is going to look like in the future. We've had the 494 plan that did that. I think that there was a feeling on the part of the city council, and maybe I'm not sure, but perhaps on the part of the planning commission, that plan was overly prescriptive and maybe draconian in nature, and maybe so the 494 plan is there. People don't embrace it. There was some site-by-site analysis done as part of the Corridor Housing Initiative in 2005. So there was planning done in 2004 and in 2005 on the site. I'm just not sure if it's planning, again, that's been embraced by the community. And I think that we need to go back and take another shot at it. I don't think that this site is a keystone in that because of the specifics I went through. So we should talk about the wood chip site and the future of that site.
Thank you. I do think that's a wise thing to do.
Okay, Bob.
My one concern, my biggest concern is with Candlewood, and if this impacts Candlewood in an adverse manner, then we've got another issue that we've got to deal with in that area. On the other hand, I'm somewhat relieved to find the answers that you gave with regard to noise and odors and those kinds of things. I would have assumed that there are enhanced materials available to solve those problems as well. I don't know about the visibility. The people on the top floor are going to see your... And I do have a question that I'd like to have you answer if you're going to come up there also, as to what your employment is now and what you project it to be, and also, Mr. Carter, if you would do that for me, I'd appreciate that. So...
Also, as an issue of the fumes or smells, we're, right now, we use polyurethane or urethane paints. We are going to switch over to waterborne. So that will pretty much alleviate any smells. There's only the clear coats that are the urethanes or polyurethanes now, as opposed to all the colors that we're using now. So it'll reduce it by 80 to 90%. We're basically moving our business employment-wise. We have 25 or 23,000 square feet over there, and we're cut down to 19. So we're just making a more efficient, newer, better-looking, cleaner facility, better landscaped, more efficient, more, the storage, and address the more up-to-date items. Putting in newer equipment, better filtering systems. And so it just the old buildings were retrofitted, built in 1930. This will be a brand-new facility and up to date and up to codes,
But you'll have essentially the same employment level, is that?
pretty
what-
much,
okay.
yes.
And if you would, Mr. Carter, if you
This
could tell
move
us.
is kind of an accommodation for Honda to
I
expand.
see. Okay.
We estimate our employment will go from 90 currently to 115. We'll add about 25 people between sales and support personnel.
Okay.
Mr. Carter, just to clarify, the 25 people, those particular jobs that you're looking at expanding would be jobs that at a salary level that one could anticipate those people, should they choose, could afford to buy a home in Richfield?
Yeah, those salary levels will range between 30,000 at the low end, and potentially, if we hire right, there'll be six-figure income on the high end.
Okay.
Yep, very much so.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, any other questions? Comments? Okay.
I'll renew my motion.
What, can I ask one question of staff, please? Is there some kind of agreement pending on this land sale? Is there a price agreed on and all that kind of business, or?
Let me clear my vacation brain for a second. I believe what the HRA acted upon was a first reading that included a purchase offer. The purchase offer was at the appraised value of the site, which was in the neighborhood of 500,000. 675. Sorry.
But there is an
There is
agreement.
a price, and that was a first reading, so it's going to go back to the HRA for a final decision. After you take action on this land use piece, then of course it goes to the city council for them to take action. There's also then the issue of the cross-access agreement and the shared parking agreement. The Lumetri folks feel like there are some aspects of that agreement that need to be amended. So staff and the HRA attorney are trying to work with the Candlewood representatives from Atlanta on making some amendments to that agreement. And so that would be really another piece of the puzzle that would allow this to go forward.
So can we put that kind of a stipulation into our motion somehow, Ms. Heine?
The stipulation that the land sale move forward?
Well, and the access and those kinds of issues are favorably addressed.
Well, I guess I haven't thought about that. If the HRA has consented to the rezoning application and the HRA determines at a later point not to sell the property, these approvals would remain in place. Look. Well, I think, because you are an advisory body, you could make your recommendation contingent on that. I think it would be up to the HRA to confirm by the time this reaches the city council that, whether the HRA is consenting to this or not.
Well, I'd like to add that to the resolution if those, Mr. Stark, you mentioned three different things, I think, that you said were
Let me ask a
negotiations.
point of clarification just for 1 second. So the stipulations of approval that you have in the document already, John, those are part of the agreement as such. Is that true? Is that what we say yes to tonight includes those stipulations? Or do we
Yes.
have to include that?
Correct.
Okay, so if you look that over, you're going to see quite a few of the items, I think. And if there's something then that we would have to add, that would be the point. Stipulations on this page, right?
Commissioner Jabs?
Clarify.
I think it would be, I don't see a problem with making your recommendation contingent upon the land sale occurring from the HRA. I guess I would recommend against having the cross-access agreement be a requirement. Part of this is based on opinion. I believe that the Lemaitre folks are interpreting the cross-access and drive aisle or the shared parking agreement one way. We perhaps, at the staff level, are reading it a different way. We don't know how the Candlewood folks are reading it. The Candlewood folks could send us a letter saying we feel that the and I'm not going to get into all the details because it's a very complicated issue with the shared parking and cross-access agreement. But essentially the Candlewood folks can tell us it's a non-issue. And if they did that in writing to everybody's satisfaction, that could go away as an issue. So I would be hesitant to make the renegotiation of that a requirement.
Yeah, I guess you have to explain to me again why I'd even put that stipulation in there. Because I don't quite get it. Because I think we're just agreeing, again, that this is okay with the stipulations that you've given us already, so.
Yeah.
I second Mr. Root's motion.
Okay, still discussion? Okay.
A motion and a second has been made, and now there's any discussion. Tom?
But your motion does not include the point that I think Mr. Hall is making. If the sale doesn't go through, the designation that we're recommending to change would not change. In other words, it would still stay as high-density residential if this property is not sold and this transaction does not go through. Is that what you're saying? That's why I was asking.
That is what the resolution says.
Excuse me?
If you look at the resolution, it states at paragraph 3, second bullet, that one of the conditions for the approval is that the property has to be acquired.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure that, because I don't want to, we keep on flipping with this particular area back and forth from commercial to housing to commercial and so on.
Right.
And, at some point or another, we have to make up our mind.
Okay. And we do at this point, so, based on this.
Okay.
Agree?
So, just,
Okay.
would you do me the courtesy in restating your motion that we're doing this as
Sure.
stated here?
I move the recommended action with
Okay.
the further conditions that staff has made us aware of. What were they? The tree and the lighting and the et cetera. Hang on, let me find it.
Which I think
Yeah, I think it is too.
okay. Okay. With that, I call the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries. Thank you very much. Okay, next item on the agenda is old business. A continuation from the May 28th meeting, consideration of rezoning and planned unit development at 7641 Pleasant Avenue, Pillsbury Commons. Staff.
Yes, as you stated, this item is continued from the May 29th meeting. At that meeting, the Planning Commission opened the public hearing and took testimony from the applicant and from the members of the community. The public hearing was closed, but the commission allowed additional written comments to be submitted by June 15th. No comments were received from the applicant or the public. The Planning Commission is not required to allow any additional comment at tonight's meeting. One reason for continuing the matter was a concern expressed by some Planning Commission members that the developer did not have binding purchase agreements for all of the property in the development. The City Council and Richfield HRA have met in the interim and made decisions on the proposed land sales. At the June 12, 2012 City Council meeting, the council rejected the developer's offer to purchase 2 of the 3 city-owned parcels upon which the development is proposed to be built. The third city-owned parcel is subject to an option agreement that the city entered into on June 2011. At the June 18 HRA meeting, the HRA rejected the developer's offer to purchase the HRA property upon which the development is also proposed to be built. As a result, the developer lacks the necessary consent of the property owners, being the city and HRA, to process a land use application for the proposed development. Staff recommends denying approval of the zoning ordinance amendment, final development plan, and conditional use permit for planned unit development, since the project is no longer feasible due to this lack of property ownership and consent. At its June 18 meeting, HRA members expressed concerns about the city's lack of a policy related to the concentration of affordable housing. The HRA members' comments echoed similar comments that have been made by Planning Commission members and City Council members. The staff concurs that although the city's comprehensive plan identifies the provision of affordable housing as a goal, the comprehensive plan does not adequately address the manner in which that goal should be achieved or the appropriate densities or mix of affordable and market rate housing within neighborhoods. Although the city's comp plan was approved by the Metropolitan Council, the Met Council has not addressed the issue of concentration of affordable housing units in Richfield, as it has in other cities within the metropolitan area. The staff proposes to undertake a study in working with the HRA to develop a formal housing policy that addresses those and other issues. Staff anticipates a process that will afford opportunity for input from city officials, the public, and interested parties. Upon final adoption of the housing policy, staff will request the Planning Commission's consideration of appropriate amendments to the city's comprehensive plan. So with that, staff would stand for any questions you might have.
Chair Chaps?
Yep.
Could you please explain the extent of the option that is out there that has been bantered around? Developer has an option to still purchase portions of the property in question.
Correct.
Until June 30th. What are the ramifications of that, please?
Well, I believe it was June 14th of 2011, the City Council did approve an option for the majority of the site that the city maintenance facility is currently located on.
Okay, we're talking, what is it, C2, C3 designation for those little parcels?
Do you recall the designation, Corrine? Was that C1? Yes.
I believe that is C1.
At any rate, it's the majority of the parcel that has the buildings on it.
Okay.
For the old maintenance facility. So that option is in place. Ron Clark has the legal ability to close on that purchase. Right now, my recollection is that they either have to close by June 30th of this year or at their own choosing to deposit an additional $5,000 and close as late as April, is my recollection. I can't recall what date in April.
April of 2013?
April of 2012.
What?
No, 13.
2013.
But I'm not positive about that date because I'm recalling a different date, but I don't want to go from memory on that. And I do want to just clarify one thing you said. The developer has the ability, they have exercised the option, they have the right to proceed forward with the option. I don't believe that it's legally possible for them to close prior to June 30th, and that's because that site has not been subdivided from the larger parcel of which it is a part. But the developer does have the right under the option agreement to make an additional deposit and then extend that option for a period of time, and that period of time, whether it's in September or April or whenever, is definitely sufficient time period for them to come back and get the approvals that they would need for that subdivision and then move forward. It doesn't change the recommended action whether they purchase that or not. They don't have control of all of the land that's necessary for this pending application, which involves most of the property on that block.
So in my mind, there are two possible outcomes under which Ron Clark could develop the option site. One is they have requested that the city council and HRA reconsider their denial of the sale. So if the city council and HRA were to reconsider that and say, yes, we've changed our minds, we now want to sell you the property, then they could go forth with the proposal as it stands now. That isn't what has occurred to date. The second would be that if the city council and HRA either choose not to reconsider or reconsider and again say, we've reconsidered and our reconsideration is we're still not going to sell it, then Ron Clark has the option for that smaller piece only, in which case they would have to come back with a revised site plan that would only fit on that site and would be a brand new application, would have to be processed from scratch.
Okay. So, given that explanation, do we have, or should we even consider changing any of the zoning on this property right at this point, regardless of whether or not Ron Clark has a plan, whether or not Ron Clark has any ideas, whether or not Ron Clark even wants to consider moving forward with the option agreement as it stands? Do we have a necessity to look at the current zoning and change it to a housing?
Okay. You don't have that ability to do that tonight because the application that's in front of you is for a planned unit development, and that means you have to look at all of the property that's involved. You can't do the approval of the rezoning for just that option piece. And if you were going to consider only the option piece and either whether it's a planned unit development zoning or whether it's just a straight rezoning to a housing district, you have to go through the entire process for that with notice to the neighbors, et cetera.
Okay, so then I'm going to recommend that we go with the staff recommendation and just deny.
We just have maybe a couple more comments first, and then I'll let you go.
Okay.
Because we're not quite through the comments
Okay.
section. Okay. Just comment I'd like to make is relative to the comp plan process and what we all went through a few years ago. And as I recall, the consultants going through and looking at this and helping us go through this situation, I'm a little bit dismayed at this point that this wasn't part of the process. Okay? From a perspective of looking at the whole plan and going through and laying out what each area was to look like and having a plan put together that was supposed to be a comp plan, it seems to me that the consultant really did us wrong, because by not putting together a process or a policy/process to carry out the actions in the comp plan, although now we know it, we lived and learned, but in fact, as you're going through the process, those steps should be in place, and it should be part of the evaluation that the public works with us on to make sure that we're identifying not only that it's an appropriate action for us in Richfield, but also that we've got the buy-in and a way to do it. So understand why we did this, understand the whole situation and how it worked out. But again, it seems to me that the process then is kind of flawed. And that, in fact, if we're going to go through it, we might as well go through it the whole way. So that's my only comment relative to this whole situation.
So I just have a couple of brief ones. One, I think the studies that have been done to this point do demonstrate that there is a need for additional 2- and 3-bedroom homes in Richfield. And I think I expressed at the last meeting that I thought that the plan that was put forward was a good one. However, under these circumstances, I don't believe we actually have any choice other than to deny. But on a separate matter, I was perhaps curious if Commissioner Hall could in fact confirm that he was the author of the Sun Current letter to the editor.
Yes, I was.
In my mind, that is a tremendously stunning lack of awareness as to your position as a commissioner, as not an advocate of an issue, but rather an evaluator of facts and circumstances put before you. And the forum for that happens to be this one, and not a letter to the editor outlining your thoughts before the matter is actually being decided.
May I respond? I'll just simply say they were all issues that I did mention in this forum at the earlier meeting.
Nonetheless, the stunning lack of judgment for me calls into question your capacity to serve in this body, and I would urge that you evaluate whether or not you should continue.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair Judge.
Comment?
I just want to follow up on what you were saying, which is something that I think I've alluded to over the past several years, is that I have never felt that the comprehensive plan has the clarity that is really required to really go forth and function. And in this particular area, the Pillsbury Commons one, the one that we had just discussed, this particular area probably outlines that as better than any other area of Richfield. The comprehensive plan, while looking at this particular parcel of land and others surrounding it, just has never quite met reality. And that has been disappointing to me. And I did attend neighborhood meetings. I was not on the planning commission at the time that was totally formulated. I'm also disappointed that there has been a decided lack of what I would call a working camaraderie in the bodies of the city charged with planning and executing housing and development. Also, we seem to not have a very good and open discussion forum with Met Council on these issues. They issue a lot of documents that we don't seem to get a hold of and discuss in the context of our comprehensive plan, and that has been disappointing to me. And we seem to be missing the mark. As I said, for years we've boasted about Richfield as location, 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 but we have not been able to achieve the destination that we so terribly desire, whether or not we want to make our pig a cow or our cow a pig. I think we need to take this process much more seriously than has been. It can't just be a process of saying no or a process of holding up a barrier. We have to have a process that is going to be in place for the betterment of Richfield 30 years from now, when many of us no longer will be here. And so, anyways, as I said earlier, I will move the recommended action of denying further recommendation on this. Second.
Okay, motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Carries. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is continuation from May 28th, considering a finding of consistency for land sale related to Pillsbury Commons. Staff.
Sorry, give me a second. I'm 5. Again, this item is continued from the May 29th meeting. Minnesota statutes provide that a government body may not dispose of publicly owned land unless the planning agency has reviewed the proposed sale and provided a written report to the governing body, being the city council or HRA, whichever is the case, regarding the compliance of the proposed sale with the municipal comprehensive plan. Richfield Properties, who I'll just refer to as Ron Clark, has proposed to purchase 3 city-owned parcels identified as C1, C2, and C3 on the attached map. Parcels C2 and C3 is actually a single tract of record. The city entered into an option agreement with Ron Clark for the sale of C3 only, so that answers the question you were asking before. Parcels C1 and C2 are not subject to the option agreement, and the City Council rejected the sale of those parcels at its June 12th meeting. Ron Clark had also proposed to purchase the HRA property shown as H1 on the attached map. The HRA rejected the sale of that parcel at its June 18th meeting. With respect to C1, C2, and H1, there is no action for the Planning Commission to take at this time because the city and HRA are not proposing to sell these lands. The staff has prepared a proposed resolution with respect to parcel C3. And I would note that it was legal counsel that that drafted the resolution. So between City Attorney Heine and myself, we could try to address any questions you might have.
Questions?
I think we've discussed it to death.
Okay. No questions? Ask for a motion.
Second.
Seconded.
Okay, motion and a second. Any discussion at this point? No? Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Carries. Thank you. On to the next item of old business. Continuation from May 28th. Consider a finding of consistency for the proposed modification of the development plan and Pillsbury Commons TIF plan related to Pillsbury Commons.
Sorry, I'm taking minutes and presenting at the same time.
You're doing a nice job.
The final item related to this topic at any rate is the consideration of a resolution finding that the modification of the redevelopment plan for the Richfield redevelopment project area and the establishment of the Pillsbury Commons TIF district are consistent with the comp plan. This again was continued from the May 29th meeting. The proposed modification to the TIF plan contemplated the development of 3 city-owned parcels and 1 HRA-owned property. That development is no longer feasible due to recent actions taken by the City Council and HRA. At its June 12th meeting, the Council rejected the developer's offer to purchase 2 of the properties, and then the HRA did the same with the HRA-owned property on June 18th. The TIF plan modification cannot occur. On June 18th, the HRA also denied the TIF plan modification and denied approval of the proposed development agreement. The TIF plan modification cannot occur without HRA approval. There is no action for the Planning Commission to take at this time because the proposed plan modification has been rejected by the HRA. So this is not an action item.
Chair Jeff?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Tom?
May I ask a question of the staff, please? In regard to TIF is generally regarded as monies provided to help in the development of a site, clean up property acquisition, and so on. One of the questions that I have and has been raised is why cannot the city go ahead and clean up the garage site on its own, stand the cost, make it clear and more attractive to a developer? Why can the city not do that? How would that affect TIF? Could you please explain that?
Sure.
Thank you.
There's really a number of issues with that. One is, let's just start with TIF itself. Historically, most of the redevelopment districts in Richfield have been what are termed redevelopment districts. And for a redevelopment district, the city has to find that the existing site is blighted and the structures on that site are substandard. If there are no structures on the site, that finding cannot be made, and so therefore it could not be designated as a redevelopment TIF district. So that by removing the buildings, that would take that tool away, the redevelopment TIF district. I'm not saying this is bad or good. That's just the way it is. What was being proposed by Ron Clark Development was a housing TIF district. That does not have that requirement. The TIF in a housing TIF district, the developer has to show that the TIF is necessary in order to help make the rents affordable in some way, shape, or form. So that would be possible without structures on the site. So the city and or HRA could go in and demolish the buildings. They would lose the ability to ever have a redevelopment TIF district, but preserve the ability to have a housing TIF district. That's the first thing. Coming up with the money to demolish the buildings, we could find or look for money in the budget to do that. That's what we are proposing to happen, perhaps on these sites in the future. With respect to environmental mediation, though, that is much more difficult. Certainly when the buildings are demolished, any environmental contaminants in the buildings themselves would be removed, asbestos, lead paint, those kinds of things. The real concern, though, is subsurface contamination. And I would not recommend the city or HRA remediate any subsurface contamination for two reasons. One is the degree to which you have to rectify subsurface contamination is dependent on what the ultimate use is. So let's say it was an auto body shop that went on there. The site does not have to be as clean as it would have to be if you put a housing development on there. So without knowing what the ultimate use is, you wouldn't know what level to clean it to. Secondly, a lot depends on how the site is developed. Let's say you've got a large site, a rectangular site, that's contaminated uniformly throughout the entire site. On half of it, the applicant is proposing to put in a building with a foundation. On the other half, they're proposing to put in a parking lot. On the parking lot side, because you've got I forget my geology terms, but you've got a surface there that doesn't allow water to penetrate through it. And so any contamination that might be under that, that's not going to wash further into the aquifer or other places. So you may not have to clean up that contamination at all. Whereas where the building is being excavated, you're already incurring excavation costs anyway. And so the question is, when you excavate that soil, which dump do you take it to? Do you take it to the construction landfill, or do you take it to the contamination landfill? And so that would be the time to deal with that. So those are some of the things that would go into the decision making.
Thank you. I appreciate the clarification.
Tom, thanks for that question, and John, thanks for your explanation. That was very good. Thank you. Okay, any other questions? Okay, none. Then I think our last items are the liaison reports. And community services, who has that? Nothing?
We're moving ahead on examining possible sites for the community band show.
Okay. Can you just, for me, can you give me a status on the skateboard park? Do you know what they're doing? Where they're at?
I don't, other than I think they are going, finalizing agreements with as I understood it, but with contractor and so on. It'll be a lesser amount than it was before.
Yes.
But they had a meeting that was rearranged and it wasn't a date that I could be there.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay.
I apologize.
Nope, thank you. City council? Okay. Okay. Housing Redevelopment Authority.
We know what we've been doing.
Yes,
Do you?
Richfield School Board. Let's see, he's not here.
Well, there was one thing that happened. The Richfield School Board recently decided to use some funds out of the operating budget, as I understand, to put lights in the baseball field, which is kind of an interesting development. I don't know that they've have used operating funds in that particular way before.
Okay, thanks,
And
Tom.
just to clarify for you folks and anybody that might be watching on TV, the addition of lights at the ball field there would be a conditional use, so they would have to come to this body,
Right.
Seek a conditional use permit. So you'll be hearing more about that.
Oh.
Thank you. Transportation Commission. She's not here.
I attended the last one.
Well, did you want to give us some
I do. I thought it was a very interesting group, and we talked a lot about pedestrian-friendly nature of proposals around the city. And it was that if we are going to be saying we want to be pedestrian-friendly, we better be doing something to be pedestrian-friendly, and we focused on crosswalks on Penn Avenue in particular, which is kind of a pet project of mine.
Well, Tom, we should just make you lay us under all these. Chamber of Commerce.
You have this one too, Tom?
I did attend one of their luncheons, and Carrie Tollefson was there, who was an Olympic athlete and a very dynamic person, and the luncheon was great.
Speaking of luncheons, there actually happens to be one this Wednesday at the Wood Lake Nature Center.
Okay.
Discussing Dewtown and the new LA Fitness with a speaker from the Fairview Southdale Cardiology Department. There, on July 6th, there's a Women Inspiring Richfield Executives, a new initiative that's going to be at the 4 Points by Sheridan with the topic of In Your Backyard. Board member Matt Giller from Hula Hands has resigned to take over the Chanhassen restaurant, and Dr. Ben Bacchus from Complete Chiropractic and Wellness is going to take his board seat. There's a ribbon cutting at Candlewood Suites at 4 p.m. on August 1st for their $2 million remodeling project. The 10th new member for 2012 is Origins Eye Clinic in the Wood Lake Center Complex at 6601 Lindale Avenue South. The State of the Schools with Dr. Slauterbach will be at City Bella on August 22nd. The 33rd Annual Chamber Golf Tournament will be Tuesday, September 11th at the Crystal Lake Golf Course in Lakeville. And the 19th Annual Gala will be held Friday, October 5th at the Minnesota Valley Country Club.
Wonderful.
That's a lot of stuff. That's great.
It's Steve, it
That's
wasn't
great.
me.
Now, may I just ask now, 10 new members this year? Is that what you're saying?
Yes,
Okay. Is that big?
it is a sizable improvement.
Okay.
It's an indication of the amount of strength and activity in the chamber.
Excellent. Very nice. Thank you. Okay, anything else? Any last minute words of wisdom? Okay, if not, ask for a motion to
So
adjourn.
moved.
Seconded.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.